Victims' families call it a maddening loophole that's putting criminals back out on the street and made a mockery of law and order.
For months, 7 Action News investigator Ross Jones has been on the trail of Wayne County judges who gave felons already convicted of dangerous crimes the chance to commit even more.
My brother was one of a kind. He was a family man. His most prized possession was his family and his children. He was just an all-around good guy who didn't deserve for this to happen to him.
Brianna Leverett last saw her big brother Sidell the day before he was murdered. The husband and father was gunned down outside Eastland Mall in 2010 by a man that a judge let free just hours earlier.
When do you miss him the most?
Every day. There's not a day that I go by without thinking of him.
The man who pulled the trigger didn't need to have the chance. That same day, he learned he'd spend up to 12 years in prison after pleading guilty to armed robbery and firearm charges. Judge Bruce Morrow could have taken him into custody then and there, but instead he gave Demetrius Edwards 6 more weeks of freedom, and the prosecutor on the case did not object. That same night, Edwards gunned down Leverett. He was found guilty of his murder last August in another judge's courtroom, and this time he was sent straight to prison.
In Wayne County, some criminals are given a new lease on life. They were supposed to spend years in prison, but thanks to a judge's generosity, they're free to roam the streets.
Since our last report, the problem hasn't gotten better. Over a recent 4-month stretch, 77 men and women failed to return to court after their conviction. Most of the crimes were minor enough to warrant just probation, but many did not. 4-time felon Douglas McCrae II pled guilty to 2 firearm offenses in February, agreeing to spend 5 years behind bars. Judge Margaret Van Houten scheduled his sentencing almost 4 months later, but McCrae never showed up. He's been missing for 144 days. Timothy Littles agreed to spend 5 years in prison too. Already convicted of armed robbery and peddling cocaine, he copped to more drug and weapons charges in April. Judge Ulysses Boykin continued his bond for weeks and then months. Littles has been missing since July. And 4-time felon David Bevel pled to 2 gun charges that would put him in prison until 2018. But Judge Daniel Hathaway gave him 6 weeks until he'd be sentenced. Bevel hasn't set foot in a courtroom since.
If you want to solve the problem in Detroit, you have to solve the crime problem first. And these irresponsible judges that keep releasing these people time and time again are just creating havoc in their own communities. It breaks my heart.
None of the judges involved in these decisions agreed to talk to us for this story, except for one.
Ross.
Yes, ma'am.
What's going on?
We met up with Judge Vonda Evans on her way to the Detroit Athletic Club with questions about first-time felon Eric Lanier, charged with armed robbery, felonious assault, and impersonating a Detroit police officer.
Here at the corner of Joy and Evergreen, a man testified that Lanier crashed into his car, got out, and showed him a police badge. He said he searched him, pointed a gun in his face, and said, "I'm going to shoot you."
After making a plea deal that included 9 months in jail and undergoing mental health screening, Lanier asked Evans to give him a few weeks to tend to serious health problems. The judge agreed, and the prosecutor did not object. Today, Eric Lanier is missing.
Well, quite naturally, I am concerned about that. But at the end of the day, we have to make a determination as who's going to be in that jail and who's not going to be in that jail.
If he does something else like what he was accused of while he's out, will you feel at all responsible?
I'm doing the best that I can. The only person that should be responsible for what people do are the people that do what they do.
Evans said deciding who to take into custody is sometimes influenced by available jail space. While overcrowding isn't a problem in state prisons, where virtually all of these defendants would spend their sentences, the county's jails are overloaded by hundreds, and that's where these criminals are held until their sentences begin.
And it's very hard always having the media always over scrutinizing what we're doing when we're trying to do the best.
As for Judge Bruce Morrow, who we mentioned at the beginning of this piece, well, months after our first report, the state's Judicial Tenure Commission held a hearing accusing him of giving other defendants bond when he shouldn't have. He's facing discipline from the Supreme Court, and Brianna Leverett hopes he gets it.
If the judge, wouldn't have gave him those few days or weeks, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. I have a brother that was killed due to him.
In Michigan, judges are afforded a great deal of leeway when deciding whether to continue a criminal's bond. With few exceptions, they can choose to give them weeks or months more of freedom unless they believe there's clear and convincing evidence the defendant will not be a danger. I'm Ross Jones, 7 Action News.